A very warm welcome to all our viewers. Welcome to our Check-in Wednesday. My name is Pamela Marwisa. I am from an organization called Transformation Team, and our purpose is to help people find meaning and well-being in life. And our focus today is on codependency. We just want to look at what it is, how to recognize it, and how to change it. I thought it would be important to just give a brief history on codependency as we get started. So the word codependency appeared on the treatment scene in the late 70s. Originally, it was used to describe a person or persons whose lives were affected as a result of their being involved with someone who was chemically dependent, such as a drug addict or an alcoholic. The codependent spouse or child or partner was seen as having developed a pattern of coping with life that was not healthy as a reaction to someone else's drug or alcohol abuse. However, the definition for codependency has since been expanded to include other destructive habits and dysfunctional behavior patterns. And there are several definitions of codependency, and psychologists, do not quite agree on one definition. So codependency has a fuzzy definition, and that's because it is a gray, fuzzy condition. It is complex and it's difficult to completely define it in one or two sentences. So I'll just give two different definitions on codependency. So a codependent person is one who has let another person's behavior affect him or her and who's obsessed with controlling that person's behavior. So the other person might be a child, an adult, a lover, a spouse, a brother, a sister, a parent, a client, a best friend, or it could be actually an alcoholic or drug addict. The other definition of codependency is a codependency is an unhealthy pattern of behaviors learned in a dysfunctional family, and it's sometimes called relationship addiction. So codependency often involves holding on to a relationship even when you're emotionally or physically abused. So you do whatever you can to keep that other person in your life, and you try your hardest to help them be their best, whether that means you want them to stop using drugs or alcohol or change some other behavior. So, how does codependency happen? Does it just crop out of thin air? Well, codependency doesn't just crop out of thin air. It's actually a learned pattern of behavior, and it's typically learned in childhood from older family members. So dysfunctional families are the breeding ground of codependency, and a dysfunctional family is one in which members suffer from fear, anger, pain, or shame that is ignored or denied. So dysfunctional families have unwritten rules. We'll call them don't feel, don't talk rules. And dysfunctional families actually do not acknowledge that problems exist. So they don't talk about them or confront them. And as a result, family members learn to repress their emotions and they disregard their own needs. They basically become survivors. And so, how do codependent people behave? How can you recognize them? So, codependents generally have low self esteem and they look for anything outside of themselves to make them feel better. They find it hard to be themselves. They have good intentions. They are good people. And they try to take care of a person who's experiencing difficulty, but the caretaking becomes compulsive and defeating. For example, a wife may cover for her alcoholic husband. She may call in and say, oh, he's sick, he's not coming to work because he's sick. But yet, actually, it's because he has he's drunk and he has got a hangover. And a mother may make excuses for a truant child, or a father may pull some strings to keep his child from suffering the consequences of delinquent behavior. I'm sure we've all come across some such mothers. They actually can, call the teacher or even come in person to say, please don't punish little Johnny. I actually witnessed it. The dog really did eat little Johnny's homework. And let's just look at some of the characteristics of codependent people. They generally have an exaggerated sense of responsibility for the actions of others. They have a tendency to confuse love and pity with the tendency to love. So they generally love people that they can pity and rescue. They have a tendency to do more than they share all of the time, and a tendency to become hurt when people don't recognize their efforts. They have an unhealthy dependence on relationships, and the codependent will do anything to hold on to a relationship to avoid feeling abandoned. They have an extreme need for approval and recognition. And other characteristics, they have a sense of guilt when asserting themselves. They have a compelling need to control others. They have a lack of trust in themselves and others. They have a fear of being abandoned or alone. They have difficulty identifying feelings. They generally have problems with boundaries. They have chronic anger. They have poor communication, and they have difficulty when making decisions. They find it difficult to make decisions. So how do you stop being a codependent if you can, identify with some of those characteristics? Well, the good news is codependence is a learned behavior. So this means we can actually learn a new way, a different way of interacting with others, one that will help us feel good about the relationships in our lives. And the first step is in changing unhealthy behavior is to understand it. So you need to educate yourself about codependency, and the more you understand codependency, the better you can cope with its effects. So there are many books out there that you can read. You can watch YouTube videos, and you can Google about it. There's a lot of information out there on codependency. So I thought I should just also throw in there some tools we can use to help us move beyond the pattern of codependency. So the first thing is to learn to communicate. So communicate how you feel directly to the person involved in the situation. Oftentimes we spend our time telling other people how we feel about our situation, but we don't tell the person that was directly involved in the situation. And it's called triangulation. So one effective way to communicate how you feel is use an I statement. So when using I statements, you take accountability for your feelings while also explaining the behavior you do not like. For example, you can say, I feel threatened when you yell at me, or I feel hurt when you come home late and you have not communicated. And still on communication, one of the things that you can do is to learn to ask for what you want. Generally, others cannot read your mind. So asking for what you want honors yourself and others. And the other person is responsible for answering based on their own needs and abilities, and has the option to say no or yes. I find often when I'm counseling some of my clients, they say statements like, if my husband loved me, he would know what I want. And I often ask, is your husband a prophet or a mind reader? Because generally others cannot read your mind. So learn to ask for what you want. Another thing is also to learn to say no. So saying no without guilt, it actually takes some practice if you have been in a pattern of codependency. So learning to say no doesn't mean that you have to say no to everything, but it does mean that you get to choose what you do. When someone makes a request, ask yourself if this is something you can realistically do, or if it will cause you a major inconvenience or even harm. So the first step in learning, this skill, sometimes it may be difficult if you're someone who struggle to say no. One of the things that you can say is not to answer directly or immediately. You can say, let me get back to you on that one, or let me sleep on that one, let me think about it. And always remember that no is a complete sentence. You don't have to over explain yourself. Another thing that you need to learn to do if you are someone who's codependent is to learn to set boundaries with others. So boundaries are the physical and emotional limits we set to protect ourselves from being manipulated or used by others. So before letting other people know what is okay and is not okay, we have to define it for ourselves. So ask yourself the following questions. What is okay and not okay for me? For example, you can say, it's not okay for people to take out their anger on me or invade my personal space, or it's not okay for people to go through my belongings or make comments about my weight. You should also ask yourself, what is it that I need to have a healthy balance in my life? For example, maybe you need privacy, or you need, your space, or you need quiet time, or you need permission to change your mind. Okay, we need to maybe also clarify how we can set these boundaries with others. The first thing is to, probably explain what the boundary is and what you will do if it continues to be crossed. For example, you can say, please do not yell at me. If you continue to yell, I will leave the room. And you actually leave the room. In this example, yelling is considered not okay and is a boundary marker, and leaving the room is what you do. And it's not always necessary to defend the boundary, or debate about the boundary or explain your feelings about the boundary. So you need to be respectful yet firm when you are stating your boundary. If the other person attempts to argue or question your boundary, repeat your original statement or request. This is called the broken record technique. So keep repeating the statement over and over instead of engaging in a debate. For example, you could say, as I was saying, please do not yell at me. If you continue to yell at me, I will leave the room. And you continue to repeat your statement. So, how do you set boundaries with others? You need to follow through and be consistent after you've set your boundary. If you go back on your statement, it is a signal to others that they can ignore your boundaries and that you're not serious. So you need to also make yourself a priority. It's not selfish to take care of yourself, because the more you care for yourself, the more you'll be able to give to others. So finally, I just want to say, if you can relate with most of the things that I've been saying, and if you think you may be codependent, you need to seek professional help. A mental health professional can determine if your behaviors are really codependency, and you can receive therapy for any co-occurring mental health issue. So help is available. Thank you.